My name is Justin J. Lee, and I'm a divorce lawyer in Toronto, Canada. And this is Happily Ever Maybe. It's a space for people to share their own stories and advice about their own personal separation and divorce. And I hope that by listening in or watching, you'll gain some comfort, some guidance, or maybe even a little bit of hope. Let's get started. So, Ellen.
Hey.
Very good to have you here.
Nice to be here. I'm so excited.
How old are you?
47.
You're not 47.
I am.
My gosh, you did not. Well, so I had a previous guest that I had on was also of the age that did not match their
the way they looked?
Appearance.
Okay.
I was genuinely shocked, and I'm twice shocked now. Wow. Well, good on you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So here's the basic facts that I have from you so far. Mm-hmm. Is your separation / divorce journey was 6 years long.
Yeah.
And it was last year that your divorce was finalized.
Yep.
So you were how old when you got separated?
40.
You're 40, right? And how long was your marriage?
It was about 8 years.
8 years. And do you have any children?
I do.
How many?
I have 2.
And how old are they?
Right now, so I have a girl and a boy. They're now 15 and 13.
Wow. Yeah. And then, so when they were going through your separation, they were at that age. I mean,
6, 7-ish. So they were fairly young. Yeah.
Yeah. And your ex-husband, how old is he? Older or younger? What is
He's about the
his
same age. He's a year older than I am.
Yeah. And how long was the marriage?
About 8 years.
I think I asked you that already.
Yeah, you did.
And how did you guys meet?
How did we meet? We met online.
Just as comfortable, as much as you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah.
I mean, people get separated for a variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of people, decision to separate is not an easy one, right? Because there's a lot that's riding on it. I mean, it could be financial, it could be cultural, it could be that you've sort of worked all your life building up this thing called a family. Mm-hmm. And for you to sort of let go of that or even initiate breaking that union, let's say, is not an easy decision. And so for a lot of people, I think they question whether the circumstances that they're in right now that's prompting them to think about separating, they have a hard time deciding whether it actually is something worth considering separation over.
Totally.
And so as far as you're comfortable sharing, like what was your catalyst or what was the reason in your mind that sort of led to the breakdown of your marriage?
So I would say that even when we first started dating, it was really, I guess, dramatic. But at that time, I just had such a vision in mind for my future of, I wanted to get married, I wanted to have kids. And in my mind, I also felt like my clock was ticking, even though it probably wasn't. So we had a really fast moving relationship where we met, got engaged, got married, and then had kids back to back. So it was a lot. And I don't know if we were actually prepared for all of that responsibility. We both come from really conflict-riddled families. Probably didn't know how to be the best partner for each other. So we fought a lot. There was a lot of, I guess, promises not really committed to. And so and I would say a long period of time where I was thinking about it, and a lot of, I guess you can call it maybe ultimatums, but a lot of discussions about the possibility of divorce. After a certain period of time, I had enough. And it wasn't like the decision came easily. There were a lot of conversations about it. But at the point where I was ready to make that decision, I was really over it.
So it sounds like there was definitely an element of rushing into the relationship, the marriage, having children, I assume. Like, how did those things like manifest into specific issues that came up in the marriage?
So I guess there's pressures of, having young children and there's a financial part of it, of, bringing enough to the table. So there was that. I mean, he was starting some businesses and wanting to provide, of course. And I think that's the goal of every parent or father. Part of it was just probably very different work ethics, and also family values. So I come from a very not strict, but everything revolves around family, and maybe there was just different expectations.
And just for context, what is your background?
Filipino.
Yeah, and is he also the
He's
same?
no.
He's not okay. Okay.
He's Canadian.
Got it. Okay. So I'm sure there was also that cultural clash too, a little bit.
Huge.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I come from a huge family where we're really, really close with my brother and sister, extended family, and they're all within the area of which we grew up. So for him, he didn't really have that. So he didn't quite understand that importance to me, and also didn't know how to, I guess, integrate it into his life without compromising what he knew. So that was really tough. It wasn't easy for him, and that probably should have come as a red flag.
Yeah.
But, I think when we choose a partner, we think of, the possibilities and the potential, and you see like somebody who might be treating you well at a certain period of time, but don't think outside of that. And, maybe it wasn't something that I thought through properly.
So from your perspective, was there a lack of effort to try and understand and sort of embrace the culture that you're accustomed to and that you wanted to preserve? Or was it that despite the efforts, that because of the differences, he just could not, there was inevitable mismatches, let's say?
So my 9-to-5 job is very, I guess, policy-driven, rules, regulation. And so I looked at everything very critically. So it wasn't like we didn't try. We tried everything. I tried everything that I could possibly think of to try to make him understand, to try to, meet in the middle somewhere, to, all of it. All of the above I tried. And at the end of the day, it just wasn't working.
So was it something as simple as, him not understanding why you needed to spend so much time with your
He just didn't want to
family?
do it.
He didn't want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
Just flat out.
And then I'm sure that also extended over to parenting, right? Because the way that you wanted to, I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, wanted to raise your children who were in an environment where, like the whole village is there to try to parent the children, let's say. Not directly parent, but be that support system. But for him, there's a little bit more of that boundary set around your family, your immediate family. And so there's a clear distinction between, our family is our own. And at the end of the day, even our relatives and other family members are outside of that sort of very strict boundary that we've set up.
Yeah. From what I remember, I mean, I kind of like blocked out a lot of it.
It is also 6 years ago.
Right?
So yeah.
From what I remember, I never questioned that he was a bad parent or a bad dad. He wasn't preventing, good scenarios for my kids in that respect in terms of family. It's just the lack of him being present to be part of the whole journey of, being with my family, spending time. It was just like, okay, you go and do that and I'll just be here. And to me, that wasn't what I signed up for. We're parents. We kind of have to do this together. That was what I was thinking.
Yeah. What about other aspects of that cultural clash, other than family values? Any other examples of those clashes?
Probably work ethic.
Elaborate a little bit. What do you mean work ethic?
We grew up in a family with, both my mom and dad worked. Grandparents did, immigrants. So, of course, everything was about how are we going to raise our children and also develop a life where we were successful. So this is what I had in mind. I wanted to build a life, work on my career. I wanted and expected that would happen on his end as well. And it wasn't really panning out that way. So as much as I was told, this is good, we're doing this together, we're working towards a future, this is how I'm going to contribute. It was all in, just telling me that this was happening. But then what I was seeing wasn't matching.
So were you essentially the sole breadwinner?
Yeah.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
For a while.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
probably for the majority of it.
Yeah.
And of course, this weighs on me. I'm not saying that I wasn't okay to put money on the table and to support us, but this wasn't. To me, this was a partnership, and we both needed to be doing it. I couldn't be putting in all of the effort and not seeing any significant contributions, at least in the future.
Yeah.
And that was challenging, very challenging for me.
And at least from your perspective, he didn't come out to you and say, for XYZ reasons, I can't. Or even that I'm unwilling, it sounds like. It's that he was telling you one thing, that he would contribute, that he understands that that's what you want, and et cetera, but his actions didn't match up the expectation that he sort of gave you.
Yeah, I don't think he was lying. I think most of us are pretty hopeful. But for me, if you are trying to build a business, if you're trying to put money on the table, you are going and doing a lot of different things. You're not going to stop just because it's not working out. You're going to try different things and, figure it out. But that's what I wasn't seeing. And to me, that is a big difference. I'm not a quitter. I'm not going to just, sit back and accept misfortune or, me not getting to where I need to be. I'm going to find some other way.
Yeah.
And that to me was I don't think it was intentional. I think we all have reasons why we don't do the things we intend and set out to do. But in this case, we are married. And that to me was something we talked about prior to getting married, and it was a commitment. So,
And I think that's the important piece, right? I mean, everybody's got their own ideals, let's say. And for some people, ideal is not that both people work. For some people, ideal is that one person works while the other is home,
right,
and taking care of the kids full time.
Exactly.
Right? But to each their own, and to that point, you have to communicate. And the fact that the two of you have communicated, and initially, from your perspective, you had made it very clear prior to getting married that those were your values, and those were your points of priority in a partnership and the union that's marriage. And that essentially was not met.
No.
That promise was not met.
No.
So where my head is going right now is there's a lot of pressure on men to be a provider, to be a capable sort of person within the family, the leader of the family, the one that's the foundation, right? There's a lot of toxic masculinity, I think is the phrase that we use now. But, at the end of the day, there is that pressure. Obviously, not every male in this world can, first, align with those values. But two, even if they did, it's not possible that every one of us sort of meets that standard.
Yeah.
And so I think there's an element of great shame in a man admitting that I don't want to work, or, I don't want to work to the extent that I feel like I'm being pressured to do. So in hindsight, do you think even when he was saying to you, yes, I hear you, and I'm going to work, I'm going to make this business work, I'm going to provide for the family, I'm going to contribute my share, that there was a part of him that maybe could not be truthful with you because of those sort of pressures?
100%. There are a complete journey from everywhere from that point, even up until yesterday. I just don't know. And like I said, we both come from, I wouldn't say super trouble, but like we were probably not raised in a healthy way so that we could talk about things and admit, certain problems that we might be thinking of. But yeah, I 100% agree. And I believe that it's unfortunate that men cannot feel safe in sharing that perspective. I do believe that in his heart, he really wanted to, but he didn't know how to perhaps build a business, a successful one, or even creating the relationships that he needed to. He had done a ton of growth since then. I just don't think he was there.
Also, wanting to start a business, for example, and truly wanting that outcome is not the same thing as willing to take on the responsibilities and the uncertainty and the stress that comes with entrepreneurship
100%.
and starting your business, right?
100%. And I mean, I was supportive of all of it. I was there. I said, I'll take care of the kids if I have to. I was also working a 9-to-5 job. So I was 100% in. And because I was also sacrificing, my career, I needed to see something, and it's not like I didn't give him a chance. I 100% did. Perhaps it was just, he didn't need to hear it from me. Maybe he needed to, he just experience it himself to finally understand.
Yeah.
But at that point in time, I was tired. I mean, when you have young kids, of course, that's going to make it even more difficult to get through that part in your life. I felt like I did everything. We went through marriage counseling. You name it, talks to lawyers, just different things. And when I made that choice, I feel that I had actually exhausted all options to try and save our marriage.
So I'm curious, in hindsight, when the two of you, prior to getting married, and when you had expressed that those are your values and you want an economic partnership as part of the marriage, if he had been upfront about the fact that he, either wasn't willing to or that he just didn't have what it takes to sort of deliver those results, do you think at that point it would have changed your mind at all about perhaps jumping into that marriage?
I don't think anyone's going to say that about themselves, right? So when we did meet, he was doing very well in what he did. So it didn't seem that this was going to be any issues, right? But of course, through anyone's journey in life, there might be dips, there might be things that get in the way. In this case, there's a lot on his plate and he couldn't deliver the way that he wanted to and what I also expected. I'll leave it at that. I don't know why he didn't. I mean, I could definitely speculate. I don't know what was going on in his head.
Right.
As to why it wasn't happening. But I tried.
And what about during the marriage? So during the marriage, when those clashes were happening because of that misalignment, if at that point, if he had explicitly told you, I just don't have it in me, or that I don't want to do that, or my preference is, despite what I told you prior to the marriage, my preference now is that you continue to be the major breadwinner or the sole breadwinner. And I would just take that secondary role economically. If he had said that to you, do you think that would have changed?
It did happen.
Oh, it did?
It did happen. So at some point, business didn't continue. And at that point, I also had to step up. Unknowingly, it became me being the breadwinner. And there's a period of time where you're like, okay, I'm assuming that things are going to pick up. He's going to figure it out. Like I would, when you're in a situation, at least for me, I'm going to go and fix it. Like I'm a solution finder. And after a while, it was like, okay, well, nothing's happening. So that just almost solidified everything that I was thinking. And at that point, I was also running out of patience, so I was taking care of the kids, working, dealing with my own emotional journey with this whole thing. And then having it been going on for so long, I was tired of it.
I'm very curious at this point, actually, specifically, what is it about, do you think, him not meeting your expectations, let's say? Like, what specific part of that was
unacceptable?
That's also harsh. I just don't want to. I want to be very careful with the words. Like, I'll give some examples. Okay. Right. For example, in my head, I'm thinking, well, for some people in your situation, the reason why they're so unhappy with that outcome is I have to deal with perspectives and opinions of those around me about the fact that this is now a female-led family, where people are questioning why, my husband, who is supposed to be culturally, socially, the norm dictates that they're supposed to be the the major breadwinner, if not the sole breadwinner.
Right.
Why in your family that's been switched? So I can think of that as an example of as to why that might have put that pressure on the marriage. Another is there's simply high cost of living. There simply is no money
Yes.
For us to do the things that we want to do and provide for the children in the way that we want to without necessary contribution from both partners. So 2 examples, for example. From your perspective, like what was it that really made you unhappy about the fact that he couldn't sort of come to the table?
There's a couple parts of me where like he's not taking my advice, which probably on his end, I need to listen to my wife to figure this out. You know what I mean? So I think there's that pride piece. We couldn't work at this together to make certain things happen. We lived a very modest life. We weren't going on vacations. We were really just trying to make ends meet with getting food on the table, clothing the kids. We weren't going on any trips for that matter, or vacations like a lot of people do. I don't know if that necessarily made me envious of that life, but I certainly wanted that to be part of my future, and I was not seeing it. I felt like I was, my future was not so happy.
I see. So
I was afraid of what I was getting into for my future too.
Well, there's an ideal that you have in your head about your own future and your family's future. Part of it is security, I'm sure, but part of it is also aspirational. We all work hard to,
of course,
lead a better life. And what I hear from you is that, like, his inability to sort of meet your expectations is sort of threatened the set of ideals you had in your head, right?
It sounds harsh.
Well, so here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say.
It's what it is.
I've been in the social media business long enough now that I can already hear the comments. I can already hear the criticisms.
Oh
right?
yeah.
And the criticism is going to be when people are listening to this is, you're supposed to be in this through thick and thin, and the fact that you sort of prioritize your ideals, quote unquote, over your family, quote unquote, is unacceptable. I can hear the critics. But here's what I'll offer in response to those critics, okay? And I say this as somebody who sees many, many, many married couples who stay in a miserable marriage for the sake of staying in it.
100%.
And for you, let's not forget when you say that you've really tried.
We
marriage
tried.
counseling, and in your mind there were no stones left unturned.
Nothing.
And you've tried everything, and despite that, the two of you couldn't come to a consensus. Where your ideals lie, and what your values are, and what your expectations are, is you are free to sort of place those where you want to, right? And nobody can judge you for that, right? And an extension of that sentiment is if the values end up not aligning with your partner, whether it's because your values are too high or your standards are too high or the other person's is too high, and that leads to a separation or a divorce, that's fine. So be it, right? But part of the dangerous narrative we have, although it's getting a little better, but nonetheless still a bit dangerous, is that getting a divorce is a shameful outcome. And the idea that getting a divorce means you're breaking up the family unit.
Oh.
And that you're somehow, disservicing the children.
No. Yeah.
Right?
I think there's a portion also. We fought a lot. We both came from, like I said before, my mom and dad fought so much to the point where I didn't think that they should have been married. They're still married over almost 50 years. His family was also problematic, big time, in a major way. He was out living on his own at 13 years old. To me, I did not want my kids to see an unhealthy marriage or family dynamic. I refuse to let that be their similar story. So aside from all of the financial part and family stuff, we also could not converse without eye rolling. It's so much more than those concrete things, you know? So it was, we didn't respect each other at the end of the day too.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bigger picture of why people choose to make that decision for themselves.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a piece that a lot of people don't see, and also what divorce survivors don't often tell when they're going through it. Because when they're going through so much trauma, so much shit, you know, they don't even know what they're feeling. They don't know what they're thinking. They're just like a disaster inside their head, conveying and being very articulate with their reasons it's just not the time.
Right. Yeah.
And I've done a lot of reflecting on my divorce, trying to understand, okay, what actually broke my marriage? You know, I can only do that now and when I'm in a healthy position too. Yeah. So, and that's why I became a divorce coach, is because people going through divorce don't know what the hell is going on half the time.
Yeah.
You know, and they might hear a million different reasons for them to think that that's why it's happening, but that's not actually true.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, also, no matter how much, you know, an individual tries to explain to others why their divorce is happening, there's going to be inevitably some parts that you just cannot convey to the other people because, you know, think about your marriage.
Yeah.
Even yours, I mean, 8 years is not, you know,
No.
super long, but even then, 8 years of context, you cannot possibly convey that in a narrative to somebody, right? So nobody can ever 100% understand the reasoning for why you've made that decision.
When I talk about this a lot, I also say there was a gut feeling that this was not the life I was meant to live. And I know that sounds really hokey pokey and, you know, just too flaky, and I've talked to other women, that is exactly how they feel. It is just this instinct, and call it the mom instinct or the maternal instinct. It's true and it's there. And you can't ignore it sometimes.
Yeah.
And in my case, even though I was trying, even though I was working towards it, that was my feeling inside. You know, it was like, it is okay to walk away from this. Everything is going to be fine. And I believed that so much. And now that I'm here today, I know that it's true. And I trust myself and what that was telling me.
And good on you for being able to come to the conclusion, because I know that there are a lot of people who are still probably, they're trying to bury that feeling that their instinct is telling them that this is not where they want to be, because you know, culturally, there's a lot of shame that gets carried with that comes with you initiating a divorce, or the stereotype that gets carried over with being a single parent. The uncertainty, I think, is huge, right?
That's
are you ever going to find love again? Are you going to, you know, ever find? I mean, not even on the most basic level, are you going to be okay? I think is a question that, you know, most people are asking, right? And you know, a lot of the times they can't quite take that leap of faith. They can't quite muster up the courage to face that uncertainty, because except for, you know, partnerships where there's abuse and there's those like harmful elements, at least, even if you're unhappy in a relationship, at least it gives you stability, and at least it gives you certainty. It gives you familiarity.
Exactly.
And for a lot of people, that's enough to make them stay.
Oh, all the time. I hear this all the time. Fear is paralyzing.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is that if somebody is holding your hand, that fear, it doesn't go away, but it's easier to handle.
Yeah.
So I always say this, thank God I had the people around me when I was going through this, because my friends, my best friends, were either already going through it at the literal exact same time or had gone in that direction before me.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel completely alone, and just knowing that people do come out of this divorce journey and they can get out of it in the best possible way gave me a lot of hope.
Yeah.
And took that fear away from me.
I'm curious, how did your family and your extended family, like what were their reactions, and what kind of role did they play? Because I ask because the Philippines, they don't have divorce. Divorce is not a possible legal remedy. right? And I know that because I have a lot of clients who are residents here in Canada or citizens here who are very happy and very glad that getting a divorce is a possibility. And I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but there must have been some sort of that cultural pressure for you to also not pursue something that's not available. And I assume it's because it's not.
I think, in the Filipino culture, family is everything, right? So you're going to try to, the pressure is there to preserve that, right? But growing up here, my parents were here in the 70s, so they had, they understand life here. Did they want me to go through this? I don't think so, but I was pretty, I'm not going to say super transparent about what was going on in my marital life, but when it finally did come, and it was shocking to me too, nobody questioned it.
Good.
So it was either they saw it coming or they agreed with my decision. Thankfully, that eased a lot of my concern. So I didn't have that issue, thank God.
Good. Yeah. Well, I you've definitely looked out there for that piece because I know a lot of both clients of mine and just people that I run into who have that immense amount of pressure from the family, their culture, to not break that unity.
Oh, yeah.
To an incredible amount of expense on their well-being, by the way.
Oh, 100%.
Right? And I'm talking about extreme cases of abuse. And even then, their family's saying, suck it up. That's life.
We had some other divorces in my family, like my aunts. So I also think that helped to kind of cushion that.
Somebody's already paved the road for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was, thank God for them. But yeah, I see that all the time too. What are my parents and family going to say? Or, there is so much pressure just to suck it up. And that was another reason why I did not want to go through and continue my marriage, because I was not going to accept this as my life. To me, this was like a no-brainer, and I couldn't do it. People would always say, "You're so brave." I'm like, I don't know if I would consider this being brave when it wasn't a choice, in my opinion. I had no other choice. This is what I needed to do to preserve myself and my vision of the future for my kids.
And in the 8 years that you were married, at what point do you think that you started getting that instinct that this was not how you wanted to live the rest of your life?
I think after I started to have, after the kids were born, because the first couple of years are just like all about the kids, and you're starting to see how life might unfold. I think it was around maybe 4-ish.
I see. Yeah. So first half, it was, part of it was honeymoon phase, and then part of it was parenting, being a new parent, and the adrenaline that comes from that.
Yeah.
So it's the latter half. You started getting that instinct that maybe this is not heading in the direction that I wanted to. Yeah. In this part of our conversation, really the main takeaway, what I try and convey to people is getting a divorce shouldn't be something that you just you do so easily.
No.
Like it's think about it. There's value in trying to preserve a marriage. There is some truth to the sentiments that you've shared at the stand during your wedding, that you would love them and be with them through thick and thin and till death do you part. But at the same time, that sentiment is not the law, right? And if at the end of the day, you've got your own reasons to end that marriage and to walk away from it, and by the way, not in a way that's going to harm the other person, and you still sort of preserve respect and dignity towards the other person.
Yeah.
In doing so, not only is that an acceptable course of action for somebody to take, it's a much better alternative than staying in a marriage for the sake of staying in it and being miserable, because all of that culminates into your children being exposed to all of that sadness, negativity, and conflict between you and your spouse. And ultimately, everybody in that family not being able to lead the life that they could have a more positive way.
Yeah. If I was modeled healthy relationship patterns growing up, I don't know if I would have been in this situation, right? And so to me, I needed to make sure I was modeling the behaviors I wanted to see my children to see. This was a huge part of my decision. You know, it was probably at least 60% of it, you know, with all of the other stuff added to it. And that's why I said, you know, we both came from troubled or, you know, where we weren't in households where everything was, and no, I get no parents or no relationships are perfect, but we were exposed to a lot of toxic behaviors. To me, I needed to end that. And I think that was my biggest reason.
Good. And if anybody is listening, that's really empowering, right? To hear from somebody who's been there, who's tried it all, and who's ultimately made the decision to prioritize the children's well-being. And that in hindsight, that you could attest to the fact that it was the right decision. Because at the end of the day, you being a happier person and you being a more content person and you being more satisfied with your life leads to being a better parent. I can't tell you the number of times I hear from children of divorced parents that they should have gotten separated sooner. But I cannot tell you a single instance of the children saying that they wish that their parents stayed.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. If I don't tell you the full circle of our divorce journey, I would be a major disservice because I think it's such a big thing of where we came from and where we ended up. I don't know. I do want to share that with you.
No, we got a lot of time.
Because it's so big.
Of course. Yeah.
And I'm shocked sometimes of what happened.
So let's start there then. So tell me a little bit about initiating the separation and what happened there.
So it actually started towards the end of 2017 and we had got into a fight. I don't remember what it was about, probably something really stupid, but it ended up us not talking for 2 weeks. In my mind, that was unacceptable. We were raising young children and to be basically like shadows of each other and only talking about the kids was uncomfortable. So at the end of those 2 weeks, I said, I think this is it. You know, there's always that straw that breaks the camel's back. And that was it. For me, that was it. Even though we talked about breaking up so many times, I don't think he actually thought I was going to do it. So it was extremely shocking for him. And we started out the new year, 2017, moving towards this whole divorce. So we lived together for about 6 months before we actually sold our matrimonial home. You know, for me, it was like, okay, we're going to get a divorce now, separate, and let's start on this scheduling path. So we had our own time, all of that stuff. Like I said, I'm a bit of a planner, so I like to at least understand where I'm going and how we're going to get there. So we finally sold our home. It was June of that year, 2017. And I moved in with family. So at first we were kind of okay, but we weren't really talking civilly. We would only discuss things on email or text. Looking back now, I'm like, maybe that was probably for the best, but I personally would have liked to go talk on the phone or face to face, but it didn't work out that way, which was super frustrating at the same time.
Yeah.
So from the moment I moved out, I was on my own with my kids. We had split custody. That was our agreement. So the kids were going back and forth. It was like a 3-3, 4-4 type of schedule.
And did you come to that agreement by yourselves without any lawyers involved?
That was the most confusing part because I had started consulting with lawyers. I didn't feel like I was getting any good answers from the lawyer that I was referred to. And at the time, you're like, I don't know who else to talk to. The lawyer should be giving me some good advice, but they weren't. And, there's Google. So it was just weird. But I ended up finding like somebody who acted like a mediator. It's kind of a funny story because I met him on a dating app and it turned out he was a mediator. So I was like, can you be my mediator?
Wow.
So we kind of worked on that, but my ex did not even want to talk about our future state of our divorce. Like he didn't even want to talk. I couldn't figure out why. I was just like, we're already here. why are we not working on it? He just refused. So anyways, yeah, we figured out how to schedule, and there's some good resources online on how to do that. But it was really difficult because he was like a trainer. So he had really weird hours. So couldn't figure out how to, I was 9 to 5, he was working nights. It was just really confusing. So thankfully we had some help just about my divorce journey. Like in a period of 3 years, I moved 6 times.
Different cities or?
3 different cities in the GTA.
My God.
And while maintaining 50-50, while also not talking to him very well.
What necessitated the moves?
Part of it was I was living with family, so they were also selling their home.
Oh.
I rented a house for a year. And then after that, I was like, I'm going to buy a house. So I bought something and I needed to save some money. So then I moved back in with my parents. But then I also wanted some freedom because, you know, if you're back at home living with your parents, you're going to be under scrutiny, a lot of questions. You know, I don't think they mean to be that way, but I also wanted to avoid it.
Of course, yeah.
Because I was also like starting to date and all of that stuff. So I was like, okay, so half of my life I lived with my sister and my aunt. So my life was literally split into 2. I had my mom life and then I had my newly divorced life, right? So it was a lot, but I needed that. I needed that space. So yeah, I moved 6 times.
Sorry, and at this time, were any of the financial issues resolved?
No, so we had sold our house right away. We split up the proceeds from that, and that was that. So as far as I'm concerned, we were done financially. There was nothing else left to discuss other than finalizing the divorce.
Oh.
We were good with 50-50. But at that point, it was really hard to do 50-50 too, because we were living in different cities. So the traveling back and forth and trying to get them to move was really hard, like move the kids to a new school. So I was spending 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon just picking them up and bringing them back home. So that was also causing issues with my work. So my bright idea was, okay, I live in at the time I was living stably in one location and I wanted to move the kids to where I lived and the school. And I also wanted to have them more, just to give them more stability. They can, hang out with their friends instead of waiting for mom or dad to pick them up. So that was my biggest concern for them. I wanted them to be normal in terms of not having to go back and forth so many times. So I went through a couple of lawyers, and this was a lot during COVID, which was brutal. So they were like, everything is moving slowly. I get it. But
nobody knows what to do because it's an unprecedented time.
And then on top of that, like their dad wasn't working. So it was a total shit show, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what was going on. So I didn't have any answers. So I ended up taking my whole divorce journey, like the legal part was really slow. And I guess I was okay with it because I was like, I don't know what else to do. So
hold on. So at that time, when you wanted to change the parenting arrangement, essentially, but he would oppose.
He opposed it.
He opposed. I see. Okay, and that's why you needed. And that's why you needed the lawyers to come in.
Yeah, he did not want to, even though he did not have a stable job. He did not have a stable home. He did not want to move the kids. And to me, it was like, that makes no sense. Because in my mind, it was like everything made sense to have them be stable. I work from home. I could help them. It just made the most sense to me.
And did that proposal at the time, would that have reduced his parenting time or keep the same amount, but just at the children's residence?
Yeah, it was about the same. So my proposal was pretty equal.
I see.
It was a very good proposal, but he refused. He refused. And I guess in his mind, he was like, I'm not letting her win this.
Yeah.
Because there was no reason for me to think why this would not work out. So anyways, so we went through a long period of time where he just didn't answer me. At that point, I was sending letters through my lawyer. He just flat out ignored everything, which was astonishing to me. I didn't even know you could do that.
Yeah.
he didn't even want to talk to me. Nothing, like nothing.
Yeah.
I proceeded anyways.
Yeah, did you ever start court?
So we were supposed to go to court. But because he ignored it all, they just granted me I don't even remember what they called it. The judge basically gave me what I wanted.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
This is so I was very concerned with my lawyer because he's not answering. Like, what now? What now? Thankfully, she was very clear on what the options are and on what the next steps would or could be. Thank God for that. I needed that. Although it doesn't sound good, it was going in the direction that was going to favor me.
Well, I'll just give some legal context here because what you say is quite interesting, and I think it would be of interest for a lot of people listening. Yeah. When you're going through a divorce, there are two ways that you can resolve it. Either by negotiating and coming to an agreement, or by a judge telling you this is how it's going to be from now on.
Yes.
When somebody does not respond to your communications or your lawyer's letters, what have you, and you're not in court, the only thing that you can do at that point is to go to court. Well, because the court is the only mechanism in which the other person can be forced to participate, forced to show up and provide the information that you're seeking or what have you. But sometimes we have cases where even when a court proceeding has been started, the other person just does not respond, which is their right to not. The consequence of that is that then the judge is just going to go ahead and make the orders based on only one person's set of arguments and evidence. All right. And so in your case, and I'm sure there were a lot of attempts to try and get him to either show up or respond. But then when he doesn't, well, the judge then has no option then to say, well, the only thing I have before me is Ellen's, idea as to what the proposal is for parenting and why that's a good idea for the children. And if the judge agrees with that, then they're going to give you that order. He didn't make any formal objections to what you're proposing. So that's the legal context I just want everybody to understand.
Yeah.
But go ahead. And so you got the order that you wanted. He would have been notified, obviously, once the order was made.
Oh, yeah.
And after that, how did he respond?
I moved the kids. So I proceeded with the order. I moved the kids, and it was probably way overdue. Moved the kids. We were at a new school. Things started to go swimmingly. They were still seeing their dad. It was fine. So that was in October of 2022. Okay, so it was just, that was just for so it happened in October. I moved them. Let's cut to 3 months after January. And, I knew that he was struggling financially because, the kids would tell me what was going on. And I was getting a little bit concerned. They had moved. They were staying at Airbnbs. And I was worried because I wasn't getting a clear picture from him because also we weren't communicating. So before New Year's, he calls me and he's like, I need to move. I'm like, what are you talking about? Move where? He's like, I need to rebuild my life. I need to move to another province. And that means I'm leaving the kids with you full time.
Wow.
Okay. That was the most devastating conversation that I've probably had in many years, probably throughout our entire divorce. Remember, we had never had a conversation. We had never talked over even the trials of our divorce proceeding, nothing. And so here he is calling me and telling me this on the phone. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, I'm going to have my kids full time. I was that person that took every opportunity of free time to make something of it. I wasn't going to, maybe in the beginning I was sad about it, but I loved my free time. And so that was a big deal. And I had also had to go through that journey of teaching myself, I guess, to accept that I wasn't going to be with my kids for half of their lives, right? So, I had already overcome all of that. And now to revert back to this, I was just devastated. Not to mention, I was extremely upset for my kids because they love their dad. And where did this all come from? So, I talk about, I think he had he struggled with a lot of different things. I don't know exactly what, but I'm sure our breakup had some part to play. And so he really needed to rebuild. And this came from a very emotional place. So I didn't feel that I had a choice to say no. Like I was like, okay, but very emotionally, that conversation was like, I'm okay with taking the kids. Of course, I'm going to do this, but please, you need to make this opportunity that you speak of happen, and you need to rebuild your life. Like I am allowing you and I'm giving you permission to go and do that. And I will take care of the kids because that's I feel that that's what they're going to need, So it was tough because I had to manage their feelings too about the whole thing. It was a big change. They didn't see their dad. So it's now been 18 months.
Yeah.
So in that period of time, I mean, I don't know what's going on with him. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But he did do a very good job in maintaining a relationship with the kids.
Oh, good.
So he's come a long, long way. So, there was regular visits, and he's even come to the point where he's, I guess, elevated himself within his new job that he got and worked towards so that he can see the kids every 6 weeks. So even though he's not living here, doesn't have a home, he's committed to coming back to see them. So remember, we never talked. We tried, the My Family Wizard app, nothing. This was during so we're at this point now where I believe that my kids really need a relationship with their dad, and I'm going to, I'm going to make that happen as much as I can. So when he comes to visit, I let him stay at my house, not with me present, but I've opened up my house to allow him to be there with the kids, so my kids' life isn't disrupted. Is it weird? Probably a little bit, but I'm not there and I lock up all my personal things, but I'm willing to do that for my kids. And that, I think for me, it was just like, that's how far I'm willing to go to make sure my kids are well adjusted in this, situation, and that they know that I'm making choices for them. And I think he's starting to see that. Of course he sees that. I believe he does because he is grateful. But, I'm just so thankful he pays child support, and he was impugned all of not all, but some of the legal fees, and he started to pay that off too. So just from where we started to where we are, I'm amazed, to be honest, of where it went.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it took some time.
It took some time.
And it took a lot of effort on your end. Clearly, it wasn't just handed to you. And eventually the choice that you made, well, first choice that he made to sort of move and to want to rebuild his life, good on him. And subsequent to that, you being on board with that idea, and eventually making choices to your expense, like to your own personal life, to sort of accommodate his new sort of situation and the children's their need for parenting time with their dad in this new circumstance that they find themselves in. It's all admirable. I think what I want to really get across to people that might be listening is there's not a playbook that exists for any divorced couples with respect to parenting, finances, or what have you. At the end of the day, you know best about your family and what your family needs and what yourself need. And what is best for you is not the same as what is best for other people. And so for your situation, having been able to come to the conclusion that what took priority are your children's best interests and their, and in this context, their relationship with their father, which was the most fragile sort of element in their life, let's say, because of his move and what have you. You being able to sort of recognize that and making choices based around making sure that that priority is upheld. That's you being able to do that because you know best your situation, right? And I say all this because a lot of people often ask me, what can I do? What does the law say? Like, what is the judge going to allow me to do, et cetera, et cetera? And I say, look, the law is there, and the court system is there if the two of you cannot come to an agreement. If at the end of the day, you and your ex-spouse can say, this is what is best for us and our children, and the two of you can come to that agreement, nobody's going to come in and tell you otherwise.
Right.
For example, I had one of the previous guests that I had on. She says to me, "Well, my ex-spouse and I, we came to an agreement that what's actually best for our children is the children literally go to different schools each year because the two of them are in different cities.
Wow.
No judge I know is ever going to order that if the two of them disagreed
For sure.
On that issue. But for the two of them, knowing their family dynamic, knowing what their own children need, and knowing what's best for them and the family as a whole, they came to the conclusion that, you know what? Yes, it's not ideal that the children have to move schools each year and go back and forth, but this is what works for us.
Yeah.
And this is what's best for us. Nobody's going to come in and tell you otherwise, right? And so just like how you have in sort of considering your circumstance and your situation and what's best for you and your family and making decisions only based on that, I would encourage a lot of other people that might be in a little bit of that might feel stuck in the process and not knowing what to do next, do the same thing. Really assess your situation and think, and apart from anything else, independently think about, okay, what is best for me and the family, and what could we, if I had complete discretion, what would I do?
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of coming to that agreement with the other person. Now, obviously, you had your differences with your ex-spouse and you had the conflict, and I wouldn't exactly call your separation that amicable. But at the same time, clearly, the two of you were at least aligned on making sure that the children's needs were taken care of and that neither of you tried to undermine each other's role as a parent to your children, despite negative feelings you might have had as spouses. So in that sense, you were lucky, I would say, because a lot of people don't have that luxury. A lot of people actually struggle with having to deal with a spouse who is actively trying to undermine your role as a parent. And so in that case, all this about, coming to an agreement with your spouse about what's best for your children, it's just not possible because the other person is just not willing to work with you on that front.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to note too, as you're in it, you might not feel that it's going, swimmingly, or you feel like you're always aligned, because there's always going to be these differences. And I say that because throughout that whole period of time, when we're figuring out the parenting schedule and learning how to do and live this life, there were a lot of arguments about that might look like undermining, right? But if I'm thinking about it, in a graph, just say yes, I guess in the long run, it was, pretty straight in that way, but there are blips that bring you up and down that make you also think that this is so not working. But like I said, as I look back on it from now, yeah, sure. But I think in the end it worked out. And I believe that we both felt that our kids needed to at least have a relationship with the other parent and make sure that was at least good.
Yeah.
I don't think any divorce is going to be free of any bickering or even a little bit of talking bad about the other parent. I mean, I think we're all just human. Yeah. And maybe it is just how far you actually take that. But I'm not saying that we were not we were angels in that respect, but we did try our best. Yeah.
I think perhaps when people, judge others for getting a divorce and separating, is that's the critical element that they miss, is that they've tried, and they've really, thought it through.
Yeah.
And for them to have come to the conclusion that leaving what they know to be their life at that time and leave that comfort, leave that sense of stability and certainty, is certainly not an easy decision. And there must have been at least equally corresponding level of sort of negative aspects of that relationship for you to have come to the conclusion that separating was the best course of action, right?
I never actually heard it from him that that's what he wanted to do. So that was kind of confusing and painful, I guess.
Separating? You mean?
Yeah, separating. It was like, I wanted to make this, I wanted it to happen, but I didn't hear neither yes or no. Yeah. So it was almost like, okay, that's a no. So that was also just, I don't know, it was just a weird thing that I had to digest, is like, did he actually want this? But I'm not hearing he didn't, or he did, It was tough. And at that point, I just really needed to stick to my guns because like I said, I felt this was what needed to happen.
Can I ask, how did you go about breaking that news to the children? Because that's a question I get a lot too from parents who have young children at the time of the separation. How do I go about breaking the news? Because it's not a comfortable conversation, and they're worried about the impact that it's going to have and how to soften the blow as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. So this is definitely a pain point in anyone's divorce journey if they have young kids or kids at all, just any age. We decided to tell them together. And this was, I did a little bit of research on how to do this effectively and not overcomplicate it, I guess. So my kids were 6 and 7-ish at the time, so fairly young, probably couldn't understand the bigger picture. So it was very much a, mommy and daddy are planning to, live separately. It's just we want, we have your best interest in mind. And at this point in our relationship, we're not going to be together. We're still friends. And, we love you. And, it was just a very, in a way, we planned how we were going to position it, which was good, but didn't take away from that extreme emotional anguish that came with it because they did not react well, which was shocking because, you think of little kids are like, they might just like carry on and go and play with their iPad or whatever. But they were shocked. And it was probably one of the most difficult memories of the entire thing. Yeah, I coach a lot about that. It's not easy and something you have to take on with a little bit of planning and also thinking about the age of the children and what they can and cannot take in their brains.
And in hindsight, do you think, being in your position now where you coach other people on how to do just that, in hindsight, do you think you would have done anything differently?
I think we did it appropriately. We didn't talk about it too much. They didn't have questions, but we were there for them to work through that kind of pain. I think my kids might say something different. They remember every minute of it, which is so sad. I think about this often, like, that was a moment that broke me and even for him as well. But it's just something you have to do, and thinking about how they will respond and also just knowing your kids, right? You do have to take it.
So what would you say are the main points for people that might be literally thinking in this moment, like how do I approach this with my children? What would you say are the key points to keep in mind to make sure that's as smooth as possible?
One is making sure that they know that you are there for them, that they will be supported, that they have both parents thinking about how this is going to work out for them. So what we also did was tell them a little bit about what the next few steps were going to be. You're going to be living in separate homes, but we will, we tried to put a little bit of a spin on it. You'll get to have your own rooms and beds, and we get to redecorate, try to make it a little bit exciting, I guess, as much as you can. But I think the biggest one is knowing that both parents love them and articulating that they will be supported and that they are not the reason why you are breaking up.
Yeah.
And articulating, maybe you're not best friends. And I think it changes, the words you choose change depending on the ages of your children. And of course, if they're younger, it's going to be more simple. And then as they get older, you can articulate it, I guess, with a little bit more detail. But you don't want to also traumatize them with the burdens of your relationship. So avoiding, he said, she said, or talking bad about the other parent.
And after that initial conversation, in your mind, do you think it's best to then wait for them to approach you again to talk about it if they want to, or explicitly set a time to follow up and talk and just have a sit-down conversation, a scheduled conversation?
I think it doesn't necessarily need to be scheduled, but I think you need to keep in mind that you should probably regularly check in with your kids to see how they're doing. So, for example, moving, buying new furniture I would regularly ask, how do you feel about that? Even just the mere fact of going back and forth. It was a very hard thing for my daughter to do. Every time there was the exchange, it would be tears. And that was hard for me, but also understanding how difficult this was going to be for her.
Right.
You're kind of forced to have to at least talk about it, in my opinion. How do you ignore, those signs of what's happening? So if you're seeing, behavioral changes, if you're seeing, big events, it doesn't even have to be big, but events that make them think that this is a new thing, I think it's good to just have that check-in.
Yeah. I think there are also children that like really bottle it up. I think clearly your children are a lot more expressive than the children that I'm sort of picturing now, who I've dealt with, who even unbeknownst to the parents, like they bottle up so well and they hide it so well, and they try to be what they think they need to be in support of their parents, which is not crying, not being sad, and always showing, sort of masking their emotions, let's say. And so the parents don't even know. And from their perspective, they often think, oh, the children are fine. But obviously the downside of that and the consequence of that is they have all these unresolved emotions and issues that they carry probably into their teenagehood and probably adulthood. Right?
So I was that child who bottled up all of the feelings. So, going through extensive therapy myself, understanding, what was I thinking at that time? And you're absolutely right. It's like you want to be that strong person for your parents. And then they start to think, oh, she's fine. She can handle all of this. But that is actually not true. Some parents don't recognize that either. If you are a parent going through divorce, understanding, how to also manage your children and how they're behaving and have difficult conversations is something that I like to talk about. Yeah. People don't know how to do this stuff.
No.
And that's why, I think having resources, having people to talk to who have been through it is extremely valuable, because these are uncharted territories for most people. Yeah. Like, how do you deal with your child who is like not talking? Yeah. It happens a lot. It happens. Yeah. The last thing you want them to do is take that into their adulthood. And then what's going to happen to them? I ask people this all the time. What do you think is going to happen? Yeah. We're of this day and age where there's so much information on the psychology of trauma. How do we not know that this is going to happen? You know what I mean?
Yeah. The marriage, divorce, and parenting, it's all, first of all, it's not something that's taught. And frankly, I don't even know that it's something that can be taught in a conventional way without experience. And obviously it's not, those things are not, you can't have a co-op program or those kind of things. And so it's a bit of a competing interest, right? On one hand, we have to have a little bit of grace for people that make mistakes in getting married, going through a divorce, and parenting. And when you do make mistakes and when you do fall short on some aspects of those things, understand that it's your first time. Yeah. And nobody doing it for the first time gets it right. And frankly, it's just one of those things that achieving perfection is not a possibility. No. Right? No, there's no such thing as a perfect parent or a perfect spouse. Yep. But at the same time, having some, especially as you say, in this day and age where we're cognizant of the effect of trauma, the access to a lot of information that are available to us, taking that initiative and being accountable to a certain extent of the things that you do or the things that you say or how you carry yourself or arrange your relationships, and putting in the effort to be the best version that you can be when it comes to marriage, parenting, and if you're separating, going through that divorce, there's also value in that, right? Yeah. So, don't beat yourself over having made any kind of mistake in that journey. But at the same time, there are things that you can do. And obviously, a concept of a divorce coach like yourself is quite new. I'm sure they've existed for a while, but them sort of coming to popularity, let's say, and divorce coach as service that's widely known to be an available avenue is relatively new. And so is a podcast like this, where people are openly talking about their experiences in the hopes of other people listening in can relate. And whatever you have to offer by way of insight and experience and now wisdom can resonate with them, right? And so, back to my first point of like really allow yourself some grace if people are, finding that they're beating themselves up over, which I know happens quite often. But at the same time, know that there are things that you can do. There are steps that you can take. There are resources available that our parents didn't have back then, right?
Yeah. And thank God for that.
Yeah.
Like I said, even in my own journey, talking about my divorce, what was happening, it was hard to explain to other people, especially if they've never been through it. Because they also impart their own opinion and biases. And it's very confusing, I have to say, right? So that also brings you back into yourself and you're just like, okay, I'm not going to talk to anybody at all, right?
Yeah.
So just having that conversation, I think, with another person about what's going on in your life is invaluable.
Yeah.
I know too many women who do not want to even talk about it. It's too painful. It's shameful that they're allowing this to happen in their life. I feel like that's a lot of the reason why they don't. The truth is, many people have gone through this and only talk about it after, which is kind of crazy in my mind too. Why are we so ashamed of what we're doing, and especially when we're trying to get to a better place? Why is there so much shame in that? And there shouldn't be. We're trying.
Yeah.
We're trying, and for the better good of like our children and our family and ourselves. Like, why is this such a shameful thing? And I'm really trying to help people understand that that's not the truth.
Yeah. It's a dangerous narrative that we have for sure, that, this is a shameful thing. If you're getting a divorce, and you shouldn't talk about it because it's all an intimate detail of your family that's no one else's business. And obviously, we're not talking about sharing every detail of your life that it invades other people's, your spouse's privacy, let's say. And again, let's be clear. None of us are saying that divorce is just something that, you should wake up and decide and go to the courthouse and start pursuing.
No.
Like, it's not, the message isn't that it should be that easy, nor that you should feel that easy about pursuing it if you wanted to. I mean, quite frankly, for majority, 99.9% of people who are pursuing a divorce, they would have, nobody can comprehend the amount of thinking and the reflection they had gone through to come to that conclusion. And so when they are at a place when they know that is what they want, absolutely no shame in that. And in fact, I think it takes courage. Like I said, and people are be judgmental towards people who are going through a divorce. Again, they miss this critical element, which is, they are doing so at the expense of many things that are going on in their lives.
So many things.
Right?
So many things. So there's like change in finances, new home to live in, the kids and the custody, finding new friendships because perhaps all of your friends were mutual, redating. Like, it's not just like you're just going to break up. I get this all the time. It's like, you just talk about breakups. No, we're talking about turning your life upside down and restarting every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
Like, this is not an easy decision to go and just do that. This is not like, going to the coffee shop and buying a coffee and, sitting. It's not like that. It's not linear. It's not, there's not just one thing that you're worried about. There's so many aspects.
Yeah.
So for anyone who thinks that this is an easy choice to make, they're completely unaware.
Yeah, 100%. Frankly, you can't be aware unless you've gone through it yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so for people who are thinking about it, people that have maybe recently made that decision or have made that decision a while ago, but they still feel a bit of shame about having done that, or they don't feel comfortable sharing that or talking about it because they don't feel good about the decision, that somehow that they were in the wrong for it. Absolutely not, right? And that's, again, the narrative that perpetuates our society that is so dangerous. Because when people don't talk about it, Ellen, that's when toxic dynamics go unnoticed.
Yeah.
That's what breeds toxicity, actually, in a lot of relationships where because the perpetrators in those dynamics are shielded by that element of shame that the other person has to sort of embrace if they wanted to go defend themselves or tell other people about it. Right? That secrecy of the family unit and this hush-hush culture we have over what might be going on in your marriage. It's a breeding ground for that kind of toxic and often abusive dynamics. And I say that as somebody who sees that way too often, clients who, and I think the saddest part actually is that they don't know how to get out of the situation.
Yes.
That's how powerful this narrative is.
Yes.
That's how prevalent and toxic this narrative that we can't talk about it is when people know that they're in an abusive relationship. They're subject to inhumane treatments by their spouse every single day. And yet, because of this element of shame that gets that is attached you to getting a divorce and not being able to talk about it, that they still cannot find ways to leave.
It's deep.
Yeah,
it is very deep, and there's probably a lot that happened in dating back to their childhood that's making them abandon themselves. Right? So it's not as easy as picking up, just because something happened. It's not, you hear about this all the time. And I also experienced this too, maybe not firsthand, but I've witnessed this. They need to talk, just like you said, people need to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't feel ashamed of it, because there are also people that will accept that conversation and provide that support.
Yeah.
You just need to figure out who that's going to be. Seek it out. If it's not within your family, look to other resources, because they are available to you.
Yeah.
Right? And people in that situation, a lot of them don't have that confidence to, look into the future and see uncertainty. It's absolutely terrifying. I say this all the time.
Yeah.
But again, a little bit of support, hand-holding, seeing other scenarios where it's worked out is going to give them some light, and sure, it might not happen overnight, but if you keep going at it, at some point in time, if you are on that path, it's going to click.
Yeah.
Right? And just being consciously aware of where you are. If you're in that space where you're, in a bad abusive relationship, you get sucked in.
Yeah.
And you forget where you are. But, checking in with someone, document it. Just remember where you are and where you want to be. I think that's, we don't do it enough.
And, to be fair to people that might feel stuck, part of why I started this podcast, Ellen, is because I think resources are available, but it's not widely spread. The resources that exist need to be made more accessible. And frankly, I don't know that there's sort of popular set of resource that is focused on you being able to hear from others who have been in a similar situation as you. Plenty of legal resource, plenty of resource on how to go to court and how to, like, what the law is, and like summaries of what have you. But as somebody who went through your own divorce, so you can appreciate when I say that going through a divorce is only half of that is legal.
Yes.
The other half is very human. It's personal. It's a lot of emotions, and it's a lot of things that like lawyers or the law can't quite address, right? And so part of what I want to really achieve with this podcast is for anybody who might feel stuck, who might feel isolated because nobody will talk about it. They feel like they can't talk about it. In the privacy of their own home, if they have these episodes where willing people are coming in to courageously share their story, somebody out there is going to listen to that and say, I can relate to that. I'm in a similar situation. And if they can do it, I can too.
Exactly.
Right? And part of the insight, of course, is when you went through it without this resource, this is what you've done that you wish you hadn't done, and this is how I wish I would have gone about it differently. And so for those people, they have that set of resource to sort of insight and wisdom and the knowledge base that you didn't have, right? And I think that's empowerment, at least letting people know that they will be okay, that there is a way, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, even if you can't see it yet.
Yeah.
There is. You just have to trust the process, and you have to believe in yourself. And here's living proof. Not a fictional proof, but somebody who's been there, done it all, and is telling them explicitly, you will get there. It will be okay. It'll suck. It'll hurt.
It's gonna suck.
There's a lot of pain.
Yeah.
But eventually you will get there. You just have to believe in yourself.
Right? You have to believe in yourself and hope, and stick by that hope that the future is going to be bright and better, which is why I called my business Better Days.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit, actually. So when did you decide to become a divorce coach?
So when I first separated, my journey was crazy, actually. 3 months after we broke up and sold our matrimonial home, I lost my job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was laid off at a job I loved so much. Like, I loved it. I've never loved a job like that. So it was very traumatizing because on top of everything else, I had no job.
Wow.
So, I mean, I was off for 6 months, and in that period of time, I had some time. So I actually became a life coach, and I got my certification out of that. I've always been interested in psychology, self-help, all of personal development. So I was like, this is great. I thought that it was empowered me to also reflect on my own divorce in the comfort of other people who are being coaches. So we all had our own story. So that alone proved to me that being with other people made you feel better. They always suggested, find your niche, you're going to do better. And so I put that off for a long time. But I always, in the back of my mind, wanted to do some sort of coaching, just wasn't sure what it was going to be. So from there, I carried on. I actually launched a different business, and then it was busy, and I was having some like physical problems because I need to get a hip replacement next year. So I stopped doing, because it was very heavy on labor. It was like a food business. So I kind of put a pause on that, and I was like, I want to do something else because, I'm just that person. I just need to keep busy. And I don't know what happened, but I was online, and this divorce coaching option showed up, and I was like, that's what I want to do. And it just so happened it coincided with the timing of my finalization of my divorce. So I was like, I don't know, but this is a sign. So I took the certification. It took about 3 months. Extremely eye-opening, especially having gone through it myself. In my heart, just want to be able to help people get through this because I went through the journey. I've gone through everything. You name everything, the dating part, you name it. And I just want people to know that there is something good that can come out of this if you want it to happen. It's going to take a little bit of work, but you can transform your life. And to me, this whole journey was transformative in so many ways.
Yeah.
And so that's why I went into it. I do it part-time. And I just love talking to people. It's painful. Yes, it is. I'm sure you know that too. But being able to support and guide, and even just to hold their hand through those tough moments, like telling your children about, divorce, is very satisfying to me, because to me, that helped me as well.
Yeah. And what better person to... divorce is one of those things, I think, experience is the greatest teacher, right? Like divorce is just one of those things that you just can't learn about in books.
No.
You can't read about it. You can't study it.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And at the time, I thought my lawyers were going to help me with all of this. And I was shocked at how little they provided me, and no discredit to you. I'm sure you're told, but at that time when I was dealing with the people that I was so lost. I couldn't even make the right decision because I was just not even clear of what I needed to do.
Yeah.
But I found a great lawyer who helped me through it. And coaching is different from, the lawyers and the therapists. We're with you throughout the whole thing, assessing your situation, creating plans, also boosting your confidence, trying to find ways to, how do you make yourself feel better during this period of time? And that's not going to look the same for everyone.
Yeah. family law is just one of those areas of law that even if you tried, you can't, completely separate the emotional, let's say, aspect of the divorce from the legal, right?
Yeah.
So the saying goes that family lawyers, in part, we inevitably have to be a therapist.
Yeah.
But obviously, we're not trained to be a therapist, and so what you sometimes get, and clearly from your experience, is sometimes they lack the empathy, let's say, or just the ability to make sure that you feel heard, that you feel you have some guidance.
Yeah.
Because again, that's not the same thing as the legal, right? That's not the same as the legal work, the legal service that the lawyer provides. Some other lawyers, they naturally have that sort of tendency to try and, well, first understand where you're coming from emotionally, and so try and hold your hand and try to guide you through and be a bit more insightful about what you need as a participant in the divorce, but also as a human being.
Right.
Right. It's a bit of a hit or miss. I would say some lawyers are going to be more cognizant of that than others. Of course, the big issue is that we're expensive. Lawyers are expensive, and so often I think the problem is, even if a lawyer is willing to be that support system for their client, they just their timer is running, and it's a very expensive timer, and so. At the same time, the lawyer doesn't want to incur all these costs.
Of course.
Because, for a lot of clients who can't quite afford, who don't have high incomes, that's not exactly going to make them feel better either at the end of the month when they get a large invoice. And I think that's where divorce coaches come in.
Exactly.
Right? And, divorce coaches, their rates are much more friendlier on your
Definitely
on your wallet. And frankly, their training and their mandate is not the same as you as a lawyer.
100%.
Right? I mean, to be frank, I don't quite know what the solution is to this. Because family law, when you're going through a divorce, it touches on so many different areas of your life. And frankly, the law, right? Like it's going to deal with your pension. It's going to deal with your property, the support. And as we say, large part of the divorce process is also very emotional and very mental, right? And so in an ideal scenario, a client would have a divorce lawyer, they would have a therapist, they would have a divorce coach, they would have a financial planner, an accountant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Agreed.
But of course, all of those come at a cost, and considering that most people, they struggle to even have just the divorce lawyer on their roster, it's difficult. I find it difficult for when I see clients who may benefit from having that additional set of expertise.
Yeah.
When I know that they don't necessarily have the ability to hire. It's a problem to which I don't know what the solution is.
I think part of being a coach is kind of imparting some lessons on critical thinking, so also being able to objectively see a scenario and say, okay, this is what's going on, and you might need help from these resources, because I don't have those specific answers for you. But here's how I'm going to coach you on how to approach it, so that you're not wasting your time, you're not wasting their time, and you're not burning money out of your pocket. I think there's that emotional piece gets us a lot stuck in our heads and we can't move. So working through that with a client will allow them to move further in the process. People don't quite understand what a divorce coach does, but so there's the emotional element and the support, holding your hand through the process, but it's also providing an unbiased opinion of a scenario and working it out, looking at what are the potential outcomes if you go this direction, and giving them at least a sense of clearing up whatever uncertainty they might have so they know how to make decisions or where they want to go. So it's not I'm telling you exactly what to do. It's about, okay, what do you want? How are we going to get there? And what barriers do we need removed? Whether that be from an additional resource and identifying for them what they need.
That is a good point. How family lawyers work is, and the way that we charge is correlated to how much time we're spending on your case, right? So it's not like, there's a set of objective and that objective will cost you X amount of dollars. It's no matter what we're doing, however much time I spend on your case is how much I charge you. And so, and a lot of the times if there are efficient ways of going about that and using the lawyer as a resource, and there's a less efficient way of doing that. And so for one person, achieving the same objective is going to cost them a lot less than the other person, just because of the difference in how they approach the problem. And so to your point, if a divorce coach is able to come in and help you be more efficient, know what to ask for, and to how to conduct yourself in a way that minimizes the legal costs, then that offset might actually be a worthy investment, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've all done it. You sit there and I'm talking to my lawyer and I'm like just complaining, right? It's not good use of anyone's time, really. Coaches charge a significantly lot less than a lawyer, right? So why wouldn't you use that? And it's also like somebody who knows what you're going through, throughout the entire step of the way. They can think about, okay, how is this going to impact this area of your life, right? So it's like having, a best friend who knows you really well, walking you through probably the worst scenario of your life, and just kind of giving, an extra set of eyes or opinion. Having that person there makes a world of a difference. At least it did for
100%,
me.
100%. I mean, I have clients who don't necessarily have a legal issue, but sometimes they just feel really overwhelmed by the process. And me literally just calling them and explaining the situation and sort of clarifying where we are and just providing that context for them, like that in and of itself is very, very helpful for them. And so if somebody else can do that at a much lower rate and that's not going to break their bank, then obviously, and if that's a resource that resonates with people out there, then it's an available resource that may be of more help to you than you might realize.
Absolutely. Yeah. I enjoy this type of work. I wish I had a real coach. I mean, I had my friends and family, but if I had someone to help me identify what I needed and what I needed to ask, especially like things like how to choose a lawyer, how to articulate your situation, what points do they need to know? All of those, even how to organize even just your paperwork. Some people just really don't even know how to do that.
No, yeah.
Right?
Well, so that's actually important that you brought that up, because I think a lot of people also, part of the shame that they feel is when they suddenly find themselves so incapable of doing things, even organizing paperwork, which
my gosh.
On paper,
Yeah.
it's easy. But the thing is, when you're overwhelmed and when you're traumatized and when your life is literally flipped upside down, even the most simple and mundane tasks are impossible to achieve.
Like I would stare at my computer and files for hours and not know, completely paralyzed, that I couldn't even move forward. And in my mind, I justified it. It was like, okay, this is overwhelming. I can't move forward. And yeah, that's probably why it took me so long. You can't do anything until you find it in yourself, or something happens when you're like, shit, I got to do this. That doesn't always need to be the case. If you want it to move faster, you can. You just need someone. I firmly believe that in any situation, in any big, traumatic event in your life, keeping that within yourself is probably not the best scenario. Talking to people, explaining, being curious about other people too, just having the conversation. You're going to find so much inspiration out there. Inspiration just to move forward in anything. And I felt that in so many phases and different scenarios.
Yeah.
You just have to do it.
This is a good starting point, this podcast, right? For people that are listening in, it might not be a one-on-one direct conversation and direct sort of support system for you, but to your point, it's having someone there, right? And if anybody can listen or watch this or listen and relate to what you're talking about in your story, Ellen, like that's support. Right?
I hear it so many times where it's like, oh, I can't talk to my friends. They don't understand. We're all mutual friends. I can't talk to my parents because they've been married for 50 years and they don't quite understand what I'm going through. I can't talk to my work people because, that's work. I have no one to talk to. And it's just, it's sad.
Yeah.
It is unfortunate, but.
Can I take you back to your earlier part of this conversation? I was going to bring it up. So you got married when you were 32. Is that right? 32. Usually, more often than not, the narrative I get is they got married too young. They didn't know better. In hindsight, they wish they would have waited. For you, it's a little bit different because from your perspective, you rushed into things because you felt like time was running out. So tell us a little bit more about that. And in hindsight, maybe if somebody listening is in the exact same shoes that you were in when you were 32, sort of what advice you would have for those people?
Oh, that's a tough one because I obviously didn't do. I would say choose your partner wisely. You don't know what's going to happen in your future. You almost have to expect some of the worst things possible. I mean, I never want anyone to go down that path and start thinking, but just imagine yourself in a very, maybe divorce, maybe, I don't know, other types of traumatic events. Will that person be there for you, with you? And really check out their actions and their behaviors and how true is this? For me, I was also, like I said, I think I really wanted to have kids and I wanted to get started on that next stage of my life. Life isn't linear. It doesn't have, not everyone's journey is going to follow that pattern. And I think we have to be okay with that. That's really tough for even women because, if they want to have kids, it needs to happen within a certain period of time. But I think also just becoming comfortable with what could possibly happen if you do or do not, do this in a healthy manner. Yeah. In the back of my mind, I think I knew I was doing this in a rushed scenario. So you start to ignore red flags. And I think a lot of women are guilty of this.
100%.
Oh my God. So many women.
Because you have a destination that you got to reach and whatever comes your way.
God, I see it all the time. And
putting blinders on.
Those blinders don't help you. Yeah. They do not help you. Think about what could happen if you ignore it. And I intentionally may have just ignored it and didn't listen to what I knew was actually possibly coming down the line.
Yeah. And this is a hard question. In hindsight, let's say you didn't have those blinders on and you recognized the red flags, let's say, and let's say you chose not to pursue that relationship. And so the alternative is that you didn't end up having children. Mm-hmm. Would you say at this point that would have been a better alternative? And obviously I say that in, irrespective of your answer, like it has nothing to do with how much you love your kids or how much you love being a parent and what have you, but it's a question for only yourself, right? Like if there was an alternate universe that was a choice.
Part of me thinks that because I had things in my past that I had gone through, that path was already going to happen. So regardless of who I was going to end up and marry, I believe because I didn't have those that healthy mindset, it probably would have happened anyways, right? So I don't know if I would have gone to this place if I hadn't gone through all of that. Right? I don't know how else. I mean, you can read all the books you want, go to therapy, all of that stuff, but there is no better teacher than actual experience. Yeah. So it's a hard question to ask, but I actually believe that. I don't know if I would have been able to learn what I did otherwise. I don't know if I would have been a good enough or strong, healthy mom if I didn't experience that and make those choices for myself.
And for other women or men that are listening that might be 32, that they feel like they have to be conscious of the time, what would you say to them? They know that there are problems with their spouse or to-be spouse, but they feel like, at that stage in their life, they don't know that they can find anyone soon enough to actually achieve parenthood, having children. What advice would you have for those people?
I would say deeply think about it because there are always going to be consequences for your actions. imagine yourself in, how many more years, if you stay in that situation, what will that look like for you? And is that something you want? Because the alternative is also possibly finding a better scenario for yourself. Sure, there's maybe a chance that you may not find someone, but if you keep that in your mind as being hopeful, and look at it as an opportunity, you're probably going to go down that path of making it happen, right? So it's just, which way do you want to go? The choice is up to you. And unfortunately, you do have to live with your own choices. And that's what I understand out of my own journey is like, I made that choice. I'm going to go down that path, but whatever I am going to do, I'm going to make sure that it's well worth it, and I'm going to come out of it a stronger person, right? So I don't think that there's any one answer. I mean, I know so many women who are having children in their 40s, so...
I mean, it's a new generation,
yeah,
right?
Do you really need to wait? Do you really need to have kids at 32? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And as, medical technology just keeps on getting better and better, who knows?
Yeah.
I just think that there's so much to look forward to, and we should be conscious of what that could look like.
Yeah.
And I think we're all capable of doing that. We all know ourselves fairly well.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just don't want to do it, but I think that you should.
Yeah. I have another question for you. It's a bit of a fun one, a bit less serious.
Okay.
Because, now we're in a generation where, divorces are a lot more prevalent. We're more open about it. We're more transparent about it, and as a result, there are a lot more single parents out there. But of course, a lot of this uncertainty or fear that people who might be thinking about getting a divorce have is, how am I ever going to date again? How am I ever going to find another partner? How am I going to find love again? And earlier you mentioned you did go on dates, or you have dated post your divorce. So tell us a little bit about your experience with the dating scene in the GTA as a single mother. At the time, you would have been how old?
I was 40.
Yeah. So, I mean, like a lot of people could probably relate to exactly that,
Yeah. It was a really funny journey. I look back at it and laugh so much because it was absolutely fun. But there were obviously a lot of problems too. It was just, I learned so much about it, like just doing it. But when you first start, I was very hopeful, and to me it was exciting because I was like, oh my gosh, I have this new playing field, but at the same time, I had no idea what I was doing. So I just said, I'm just going to go for it, and I'm just going to have fun with this. The beginning was probably very naive. I went on to Tinder and I said, newly single mom. Like, oh my God. No wonder I got thousands and thousands. I'm not even joking. Like thousands, just like, this is insane. So I think I just had to do a lot of, for me, I was testing the waters, and I looked at it as a way to rediscover myself. Thankfully, I had at least my own strength to, discern, filter. But I really went in it with an open mind. Sometimes a little bit too much, but it was fun. I really enjoyed it. I was dating on apps for about 3 years, which was crazy. I was on and off. And at certain points I was like, this is a disaster. And also in the beginning, I didn't want to talk about my situation. I said, I'm a mom, but I'm not talking about it. That's not where I am in this dating journey. So let's just keep that off the table for now. When I feel comfortable, I'll talk about it. So kind of made things easier. But eventually I was just like, no, I am a single mom. I'm a single parent. I have things that I need to at least articulate because they needed to understand where I was coming from. And so it led me into being more open about it. I think the good part is I met so many different people, learned a lot about myself and what I wanted and what I wanted for my kids. I dated a lot.
Good on you. So got it, Ellen.
it was crazy, but it was fun. But I did meet someone on a dating app, and he's a single dad as well. And it just worked out actually really well. So I'm super happy with it. We've been together for 3 years.
Wow.
We're kind of, I guess, we had to navigate how to be, we're not married or anything, but we had to learn how to work in this blended relationship. Which is very interesting and fun. And thankfully I have a good partner to navigate this new area.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I guess I'm sure in the same way that you now have all this insight and sort of that you've had this introspective journey to learn about yourself and have all that to sort of apply to your new relationship. The same thing goes for your partner, I assume. And so, but to the point about him also being a single father, I'm sure that often serves as that common ground for a lot of people that's back in the dating game. There's a level of comfort and connection in knowing that you went through a similar process and you're in a situation in life that's not so dissimilar to yours. But did you also find that your status as a single parent was a deterrent in any way with any of the...
So, yes, and in different ways that you wouldn't actually expect. So, yeah, of course, some of them were like, well, you don't have enough time for me. It's impossible to date you. They couldn't understand that I can't respond to a text within 15 minutes. Like literal abuse coming from people who couldn't understand why I was just not available. So there's that. And then I also got some guys actually using it against me, saying, oh, no wonder, like if things didn't go out well with me and that person, oh, no wonder you are divorced. And it was just like much, it was crazy. It was insane. And I'm telling you, like I was so frustrated with that incapability to understand what a single mom goes through and only looking at us as, stupid, you chose to end your marriage kind of thing.
Oh my God. And this was all coming from people you were dating.
Oh yeah. So that's the bad side. And then there's another part where it's like, I'm in my 40s. I have 2 kids. I don't want to have more children. So, there was discussions about that too, where it's like, I'm not, and I was dating slightly younger guys at the time. I'm not there. We were in different areas of our life. Like, how is this ever going to work? Eventually trying to find someone, it was like finding a needle in a haystack, in my opinion. Like there were so many variables that it needed to work out.
Yeah.
Like I'm so thankful because I'm telling you, it's not easy. I see it with my friends who are divorced all the time, and it's like, I don't know if it's the city, but it can be a disaster.
Yeah, I mean the good part I'm sure is it's the abundance of people, and so at the end of the day, the dating game is a bit of a numbers game. So if there's a lot of people, then somewhere in the midst of those large demographic, you're gonna find somebody for you. But
eventually, but
you also had to navigate through a lot.
I had to kiss a lot of frogs. Just saying. Somebody once told me that. I was like, I like that statement. But it's true. And it's not just divorced moms. It's everybody. Every woman is feeling this way that I actually see. It's like, where are the good guys happening? Yeah. So it just made it more difficult for me. And in my, like you said, it's a numbers game. And I literally saw it like that. I was like, if I exist, if I am a good person with good intentions, how is it that I'm the only one? There's got to be someone else out there. Yeah. So I kept telling myself that, and eventually it worked, right? Eventually you found somebody. Yeah, it happens. Yeah, but you can't give up. I think that's the point. Like you can't give up. Yes, there's going to be some really interesting and terrible people out there. But I don't believe that that's the norm. I believe in people. I believe in the fact that there are, really good people who have, the right intentions, who are possibly even just meant for you. Yeah. But yeah, that whole dating, I loved it. I thought it was great and so many exciting things. But it was I always tell everyone this, you have to have thick skin to go on dating apps for one, but even thicker skin to go on it as a single mom.
Yeah.
Like,
and I'm sure part of that is also you have to have boundaries.
Oh.
And you have to really stick to it. You have to first and foremost respect it yourself so that other people don't tramp that, right?
I learned that the hard way. Because I was naive and very optimistic. So that was how I went about. And, people cannot be respectful. So once I learned what that needed to look like, then it was like, okay, let's do this again. It's not for the faint of heart. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. And can I ask about your experience with introducing your children to your new partner? Because I'm sure that's also a lot of questions that people have. Is how do I go about that appropriately? I mean, obviously they don't want to create any disturbances in their children's life, and so I think one thing for sure that everybody agrees on is like, yes, wait until it's serious and that that it's going to be a long-term thing before you introduce anybody that your children might develop attachment to. But beyond that, well, first of all, what was your experience like?
So when I started dating, part of it was like I couldn't hide it because they would see my phone like flashing and they'd be like, what are you doing? So I had to be honest up front with what was happening. Like, I am dating, but I'm not introducing anyone to you guys. And, it's just kind of just light and easy because my daughter actually told me, I forbid you from dating.
Wow. Protective daughter. Yeah.
But I kept on saying like, eventually this has to happen. I can't just be alone forever, right? So I did have those conversations for a while. But when I finally decided to introduce them, first I had to make sure that I was in a healthy, like you said, I did so much work on myself that I trusted that I was doing the right thing and choosing the right person. So we did it very naturally. And first he met my kids. I didn't even tell my parents at that point because I wanted to know like my kids were okay with it before I even made it big.
Right.
It might sound backwards, but to me, they were my first filters.
I think that's right, actually. No, I think that's right.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
they were my,
right.
I needed them to be, and so it was started out like, okay, I want you to meet him. So we did it very casually. And then eventually we brought his kids together and, just going to the park and hanging out and just very light. And, and then it just kind of progressed to like hanging out more and sleepovers. So thankfully they get along really well.
And his kids are a similar age group?
Similar. One is slightly younger.
Got it. Yeah.
And
which helps, I'm sure. Yeah.
And I hear nightmare stories of where the kids don't get along. Like, I'm so thankful. Like, I've been blessed with this type of scenario.
Yeah.
But I really needed to figure out what I wanted. Because there were opportunities where, maybe I could have introduced them to my kids as like boyfriends, but it just didn't align and I didn't feel it happening.
Yeah.
It took a long time.
Yeah.
So I put a lot of time and effort into figuring out when that was going to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like there were rocky parts of this journey for you, but there are also other elements where, you really lucked out, right? From having at least a partner who at a basic level understood that the priority was the children's best interest.
People always say, oh, you're so lucky. But I'm like, I don't know if it was luck. I feel like I actually worked for this.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all, actually. Yeah.
I tried so hard to find someone. It's so not easy. So, for anyone who's thinking, you'll meet that person eventually, I don't know if it necessarily works out that way. Yeah, sure, this might happen, but you need to put effort, You
gotta kiss some frogs.
You gotta go out there. You gotta figure out yourself. You need to, go have some fun. It's fine. I think it's fine. I would highly recommend that they go on that self-discovery. And if that includes dating, why not?
100%. And, it's I mean, I always say dating is a crucial set of experience. Mm-hmm. The real value in dating is you get to learn about yourself.
Oh.
Right? And what you want, and you can start to really understand what it is that you need in a relationship,
Yeah.
and what you want and what your non-negotiables are. And so that you could apply those lessons into your, eventually what will be your hopefully long-term relationship, so that you can maintain that in the most healthy ways possible.
Mm-hmm. I remember like dating and there would be like aspects of what you wanted in one guy, and then there was another, and there was like, wanted them all to be together into like, why can't they just be in one person? Eventually it did, but it's like, you have to think of it holistically and in a whole, because yes, you're going to meet amazing people along your journey, but they may not meet everything.
Yeah.
And no one ever actually is going to meet all of your needs. But, if you're only with someone for one specific thing, is that really what you want in the future? Yeah. And I think for me, it was like, okay, I liked this. And then piecing it all together to say, okay, this is what I want and this is what I loved.
Yeah.
And that's what eventually happened.
Yeah. Good. I'm happy for you.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm happy for myself too.
Any other thing that you wanted to add? Any advice that you wanted to give?
For dating?
Anything.
I always hear about people who just like are feeling so stuck, can't move. There is also this element of self-care, and that piece looks so different. I mean, we hear about it all the time. Self-care this, self-care that, go to the spa, there's so many different ways to go about taking care of you. And I think that we need to be open to what those could be. It's not going to look the same for anyone. For one person, it might be going out for drinks, partying, and the other person, it's staying home. So what might look like works for someone else isn't necessarily going to be you. So I think it's about staying true to yourself, being honest with yourself, and like also being open to, new experiences.
Any other advice?
I think that's it. Good. I think we covered a lot.
We did. Yeah, I think we did good. If anybody wanted to reach out to you, Ellen, or if they wanted to find out more about your services, where can they reach you? You
can find me on Instagram. It's Ellen_BetterDays. And then the other one is on my website. It's betterdaysdivorce.com. Yeah.
Thank you for being here, Ellen.
Yeah, thank you. No, it was great.
If you'd like to share your story in this podcast, or if you need a family lawyer, go to my website, jleefamily.com. That's JLEE family.com. Thanks for listening. And remember, it's going to be okay.